Welcome to Solo Pro Radio. It's the only resource for self-employed professionals to grow their business. I'm Barbara Saunders, the Solo Pro Success Expert, and it's my mission to help brilliant creative solo pros go from freelance to flourishing. And I do that as the director of the International Association of Self-Employed Communication Professionals and as the founder of the Solo Pro Academy, where I have programs focused specifically on helping solo pros build a profitable, custom-fit business. Swing on by soloprosuccess.com and pick up your free Income Accelerator Success Kit. If you'd like to join us, zip on over to Solo Pro Radio on Facebook and like our page. You'll be able to ask questions, get to know our co-hosts, and find resources to help you connect and grow. Today, my guest is attorney Katie Lang. Katie is a negotiation expert. She provides her creative clients with legal services such as dealing with contracts, protecting intellectual property rights, and licensing their work. She also helps with private negotiation coaching, and she teaches negotiation seminars. By day, she works for a big company, but on her off hours, she works for solos. Her website is workmadeforhire.net. Welcome, Katie.
Hi, Barbara. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
Oh, I'm so excited to jump into our conversation today. It's such an important topic for our listeners. I love your website, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I am proud with how that came out.
I like the little the cartoons of you and how they dance all over them.
I got pretty lucky. I have a live-in cartoonist. She has an in-house counsel.
That's where it came from. I was going to ask clients.
So that's how I lucked out with those great cartoons.
Oh, fun. Well, I wanted to start out today. You mentioned on your, I think it's your LinkedIn profile, that you live with a ridiculous amount of animals. Tell us a little bit about that.
I live in Portland, Oregon with my wife, and we live in a small-ish 900-square-foot house with one ridiculous French bulldog and two tabby cats, which in 900 square feet can feel like a lot of beings all at one time, especially when everybody wants to be just on the couch. So yeah, it is important for me to have something to laugh at on a regular basis, and my dog and my cats definitely help with that.
Oh, definitely. Aren't they the best stress relievers there are?
Yeah, they absolutely are. Yeah, being able to pet an animal that just likes you because you're there is a good stress relief.
Oh, definitely. I know. I just brought home a new Pomeranian puppy this weekend, so
fun.
It's like walking a dust bunny.
A very cute dust bunny.
Definitely. Well, tell me, what is it? You're an attorney. What drew you to doing law in the first place?
I first started thinking about law school, I think when I was in college. I had worked at a nonprofit theater when I was in high school. They had an apprentice program, and so it was a really great program. You had to apply, but once you were accepted, they had regular workshops about professional theater, everything from costume design to lighting design to playwriting to different acting workshops, and I loved it. Basically, you had to volunteer a couple hours a week or a month, but then after that, you could show up pretty much whenever you wanted to. So for the last 2 years of high school, I pretty much lived in that theater, and I got to see how a professional creative business runs with a lot of very passionate people who are very invested in making great art, but who didn't always have access to the information that they needed to make the business run smoothly. And I saw, like with a lot of small businesses, there were definitely some areas where they struggled. So when I was in college, I started thinking that maybe law school, maybe becoming a lawyer would be a good way for me to continue contributing to the art that I loved, but also be able to help people not get so tied up in the business side of it, or have access to the information that they needed in a relatively easy way so that they could focus on what they were passionate about, which was making more art.
That really fascinates me. I've been really passionate about helping self-employed professionals, earn a living, create a business that fits their lifestyle for years, and I totally resonate with what you're saying and where you're coming from. There's just this movement, it seems like, that people want to get away and, whether it's creative skills or intellectual skills, they want to make a living on what they do best.
Absolutely, and I think it's really fun and rewarding to be able to help somebody with that creation, to be able to help them get from, this is my hobby, I spend a lot of time doing it, to, hey, I think this could be a good side business, to, I can make my living doing this if I do it correctly. So helping people through those stages, I think, is a wonderfully rewarding experience, and I'm excited when I get to participate.
That is. It's very exciting. I always tell people the Internet, levels the playing field for the solo-based professional. They can really get out there and start either teaching or creating or selling what they've made. And the big piece that's missing is that legal piece that protects what they've made, getting out there. So talk to us a little bit about how you see, bringing that piece into the small business. How easy is that for, the solo person to maybe get some legal help in protecting what they've created?
I think a lot of the legal answers are interesting and challenging, relatively straightforward. Usually, when I'm talking to some of my clients, we're gonna talk about a handful of different things. So we're going to talk about maybe a contract that they're reviewing or a contract that they need with their collaborator. And then as we go down those paths, it's figuring out, okay, what are the particular issues regarding their business and regarding what they're interested in that we need to be paying attention to so that they're protected properly. I don't know that it's always easy to find that information, in part because law is sometimes difficult to understand, in part because it's not always explained very well. So it can be hard to get not only accurate information, but accurate information that is easy to understand and then immediately apply to your business. So working with a lawyer can be very helpful, just in sort of, if you view them as both as an advocate and as a translator. But then I think the other thing is that there aren't a lot of attorneys who really focus on, what I would consider the small business, the solopreneurs, the freelancers who are really supporting themselves with their business. They have just as much demand and need for good quality information, but they don't always have the same amount of budget to so. And lawyers are also people who are, working for themselves a lot of the time. And so I think, unfortunately, it's a portion of the population that's been overlooked. And I think that's both too bad for that growing section of the economy, but also too bad for lawyers, because there are a lot of really interesting things happening there that are not only rewarding professionally, but monetarily rewarding. It can really support a practice and a business.
Well, I love hearing you say that, because I truly believe we're in a very evolutionary period in our history, especially where business is concerned. We've heard the phrase, the rise of the creative class, and I think that's happening. We're seeing it happen, and sometimes I think it gets lost in the shuffle of everything else that's going on. But I'm really intrigued with the changes, and it's been hard. I know, and maybe you can talk a little bit about this, for the laws to keep up with the changes going on, with Creative Commons and the internet e-commerce. What are some things that maybe, a creator, whether it's intellectual property or creative property, what are some of the things they need to be aware of or even think about?
I usually, when I talk to my clients, I try to get a good understanding of where they are right now and where do they want to go, because answering those questions is often more helpful than me saying, well, copyright does this, trademark does that, you need a contract for this thing, you should, consider incorporating as an LLC. If I just go through those things, which are important to me, because as a lawyer, those are the things I practice, I miss out on hearing what's actually valuable to the client. So I would start off my answer with a very lawyerly way of saying it, which is it depends. And it depends on the particular individual. What is the most important thing for them to protect? What is it that their business is doing? And then building out from there. Because a lot of solos don't have the budget necessary to protect everything all at once. So identifying those things that are closest to the core of their business and then working out from there as a strategy that I find is particularly helpful. In terms of the law keeping up with the times, I think that's been a problem always, because the law works in a very particular way. There's a structure in how law is created and how it is modified that doesn't always match the pace of creativity and people going out and trying new things. So I think intellectual property is definitely one where we're sort of scratching our heads, because we have the Copyright Act that acts in one particular way, but the Internet is now much easier to share and distribute art than it was when Congress was looking at this. The last Copyright Act was written in 1976, and it became law in 1978. So it's been a while. There have been a couple of modifications, but technology is very, very different. I think the other thing, though, is that we need to break away from what you have to do and what the right thing for you is. So, for instance, with copyright, you don't have to protect your copyright in everything that has that is copyrightable. Some things it might be better for you to use a Creative Commons license, or just decide that you're not going to enforce your rights as a copyright holder, because being able to disseminate that and share that information is so much more important to you. The gentleman that does the blog Zen Habits has a great posting as to why he everything that he writes there is he licenses it to anybody to use for whatever purpose they want. He's not going to enforce his copyright because he wants to see what other people create with that. And that has been incredibly valuable for him. And he has data that shows by doing that, he's actually able to attract more business than he was when he was locking everything down. So I think it is, we need to change our perspective not only in terms of what does the law allow you to do, but what is the right thing for you to do as a business person. Maybe enforcing your copyright isn't the right thing. Maybe it is. Maybe it's absolutely necessary. But you can't find those answers if you start with the law. You have to start with the business.
I love that answer, because it does fit right into how we're building businesses today.
Mm-hmm.
It's so important for people to get their expertise and their positioning out there, and really the only way that is to do it, like you're explaining with the Zen Habits fella. A lot of people are doing blogs, blog posts, articles, that sort of a thing, where it is their intellectual property, but they need to get that information in other people's hands and get it spread out so that they can start bringing people back to them for the copyrighted information they're going to sell.
Yeah, absolutely. And, especially with more and more ebooks happening, I'm seeing people really struggle also with the question of, do you use digital rights management software on your ebook so that it can't be copied and disseminated amongst other people who haven't paid for it? And what is the benefit of doing that, and what's the detriment? I think in the past we've looked at these questions purely from the point of view is what would work for a medium to large-sized business? What would they be interested in? And that's a different question, because you're looking at a completely different structure with a completely different ability for flexibility and different needs. When we're looking at smaller businesses and individuals, we really need to ask ourselves, what's in your best interest? And then what can we do within the law to protect your core interest and really use the law to build and grow.
Excellent point. You know, where a larger company has the budget for more advertising, the smaller company actually can use these intellectual pieces that they're creating as their advertising.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And concept. That to me, that's a fascinating concept because it does help build a business where there isn't such a large back-end budget.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what is interesting to me are all the different ways people are using the internet right now. As new social media comes out, and you think, well, geez, there's no way you could possibly use that to support a business. It's just silly and fun. But that's not how people end up using it. I mean, there are a number of people who are very popular on Vine because they can make these 6-second videos that are very well crafted and well scripted, and then they can tie that back into, I offer these services, by the way, professionally. I'm either a storyboard artist, or I'm a videographer, or I'm a writer. And so if you liked this 6 seconds, I can show you even more with my own company. So it's interesting to me to see how people are really using the tools that are being created and using them oftentimes in ways that they were not originally intended.
Well, that's the fun part, I think, for me anyway, is watching this evolution take place, and it is the creative class that is rising and leading the charge.
Yeah, it's interesting to see so many people thinking about work differently. We used to think of it purely in terms of going to work for somebody else, and becoming an entrepreneur, starting your own company seemed like a very risky endeavor that required a lot of capital, and that's not quite the same today. It's also very risky, as we've seen in our economy, to really marry yourself to a traditional job. So we're seeing a lot of people just reevaluate and say, you know what, this might be really risky, but it is worth it for me to take that risk because it is less risky than some of the other options I see.
Totally agree with you. There was one question I wanted to make sure I asked for our designers out there, and kind of preface it for them because I actually had someone come back to me and tell me to make sure to ask this question. I work with a lot of graphic designers, and I remember a few years ago there was all this talk about buying fonts or getting the license to use fonts in your design for your clients.
Correct,
and
yeah.
If you did not own the rights to the fonts, you could not deliver those fonts to your clients.
Correct. You could physically deliver them, but you are placing your client in that situation in a sort of precarious place because they can now be sued for using the font without a license. And if the owner of the font discovers that, they can proceed with either a copyright claim if they have a copyright to the font, which they may or may not, depending on the situation, or if they've protected it in some other way, they can enforce those rights now against the client that the designer gave the font to.
Right. Yeah. Thank you so much for answering or tackling that topic for us. Because I have to tell you, as I was telling people I was having you on the show, this was one of the major questions that came back to me. Is can you check on that font thing again for us?
Well, yeah, and it's an important thing because there's buried in a lot of the contracts that designers are signing with their clients is this promise that everything that they deliver is free and clear of any intellectual property claim that could harm the client. And so usually we think about, images that we're using or maybe some other design elements and saying, oh, no, I've got the licenses for that, or I took it so it's mine and I know I can license it to my client. But we don't always think about the font choices. And luckily there are not only a number of really beautiful fonts that you can buy, and the license is pretty permissive. There are also a lot of new free font packages that work very well, depending on what the page is designed to do.
Yeah, thank you so much for addressing that, because I think that there's a lot of little hidden landmines, especially in that area of creative business.
Mm-hmm.
With designers, I don't know that writers have the same issues, unless it's in the errors and omissions piece. But there's a lot of little confusing pieces, and the reason I bring that up is for our listeners to know that there is a reason maybe you want to stop a minute and talk to someone like you, Katie, to give them a little bit of direction in whether it's their contracts that they're signing with their clients, or with the services they're providing their own clients.
Yeah, it's one of the nice things with the Internet is that there are now so many more professional organizations that you can tap into and get good information from. Like the Graphic Artists Guild is one that I think of. They do a fantastic survey every year on price and cost and how people are charging for their services. And they also have an ethics guideline that you can get as a member that is relatively inexpensive. I think it's about $20 for the book. But it helps you think through some of those things as it relates to graphic art design. But there are a lot of places where traditionally we've thought of, in the previous example, images as being the things that we really need to pay attention to from a rights perspective. But there can be other things that are you need to pay attention to. So it can be very helpful to talk to an attorney. And again, to talk to an attorney who is able to listen to your business goals and needs and interests, and then provide information based on that, not the other way around.
Yeah, that's really great advice, and it leads me to another question. We're kind of talking about using other people's artwork or things, whether on purpose or not intended to. What about when I'm thinking of a specific fellow I know who is kind of a logo expert here in town. You might actually know him, Jeff Fisher. He is kind of a legend in our field. But he's gotten to the point now where he's done so many logos that he actually has a search out globally of people copying his logos. He's always sharing with us, I caught another one and here's this. How do you do those searches? How do you know when other people are using your work?
There are some law firms that specialize in providing those search services, and then there are also just some professional organizations that you can get to scour the Internet and see if somebody is doing something that looks similar to what you've done. And in that situation, it could be twofold. It could be a copyright issue in the design itself, or it could be a trademark issue. With the trademark, we're talking, it's usually what people think of as a logo, but it is a word or a design that is intended to associate a good or service with a particular company. So as a consumer, I can look at something, and I can look at a shoe, and if it has a swoosh on it, I can feel confident that that's a Nike shoe. And so that's the idea of trademark, is that it's actually protecting me, the consumer, rather than the business. But the business has an interest in protecting that because they want the consumer to keep associating their high-quality goods or services with them. So, there are lots of different ways of doing it. One of the easiest is using, like if you're going to do a DIY thing, using Google image search. They've reused it recently so that you can drag and drop an actual image into the search bar, and it will bring back hits of things that look like it, either the exact image or things that match closely. Now, it depends on what kind of file it is and how detailed it is, but it is a fairly basic way that you could do some searches on your own.
Well, that's a brilliant tip. Now, is that something you would suggest someone in that situation do regularly, just in case?
I think it really depends. With most designers, you're not retaining rights in those logos. You are creating them specifically for the client so that the client can use them, and the client's more than likely going to demand full ownership of it. So it's the client's responsibility to protect their mark. But if there's something that you've created that's important to you or that's valuable to your business, then yes, it's important to look out and make sure that nobody's using it inappropriately or using it in a way that you would not permit them to do under a Creative Commons license or whatever else it is that you're using. But again, with most people who are starting out in their freelance career, the most valuable part of their business is them and the services that they're providing. And it makes a lot more sense, I think, in my mind, to focus protections there than on a particular trademark. Now, as your business grows, it definitely makes sense to look into those things. And if you are a company where you really need somebody to associate this particular word or this particular design with you, then maybe trademark is going to be very important to your business. But again, it really depends on what you're doing and what the goal of your business is. In terms of where you invest not only your money, but your time.
Well, that's an excellent, I appreciate that information because it does kind of relieve a little bit of the stress. I know that a lot of, especially on the creative side, they're more worried about people ripping off their ideas than they are about building their business. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a great way to save that energy for at least later. Put that energy somewhere else that's more productive.
You want to invest your energy where it's going to be where you're going to get the greatest return. And for a lot of people, that's going to be in creating, not protecting. I don't want people to hear that I am anti-protecting your intellectual property or looking out for yourself. I'm absolutely a huge supporter of that, but I don't like giving people the impression that they could screw up their career really early on because they didn't do thing X. Those are, in the grand world of possibilities, there's always a possibility that could happen, but it is slim. And so I find that it is much better to invest your time and energy in doing something that's actually going to build and create your business rather than in something worrying about what you don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Let me kind of take and split that question in half now that you answered it so well. We've got a group of people who are creating for their clients, and then their clients are buying the rights, and they have to worry about it. Mm-hmm. And then we've got a group of people who are creating products, say like training products or information products, books or programs that are the product of their own company. Mm-hmm. So those people should be worrying more about protecting that item.
Yeah, if it's work that they don't want people to be exchanging freely amongst themselves. They don't want somebody to take an ebook that they've created and make 20 copies and send it to their friends. They don't want their training materials or other materials to be widely disseminated. Then yes, it makes sense to protect those rights or protect those interests. And again, that's going back to the conversation about really focusing on what's the purpose of your business, what are the interests that are most important to your business, and starting there from a protection point of view. There are a lot of different ways that people can protect their work. I always recommend that people actually check out the U.S. Copyright Office website, which is just copyright.gov. They have a great collection of pamphlets and FAQs to help people understand how copyright can apply to their work. The other thing that I recommend is that people read up on something called the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, the DMCA for short. One of the provisions in there says that if you find your work being inappropriately used on the Internet, you can, the website has to have a place where you can go and file an objection and say, I own that, and this person does not have permission to use it. Remove it from your website. Oh. Now, you have to swear under penalty of perjury that you own it, that you have the rights to it, and that this person does not have the rights to it. All of the different elements that you have to include in your notice are usually mentioned on the website's intellectual property complaint site. They'll tell you exactly what they need from you. But read up on the Act itself. There's a lot of good information out there, and you'll find a number of standard boilerplate letters that you could use and plug your information in. The person who's misused your information has the option of objecting and saying, no, I do have the right to use that, either because my use is a fair use, or I'm using a portion of it that's not copyrightable, or I have a license, or whatever. The website can consider that objection, and if they say, yeah, it's a fair objection, they'll let you know, and you would have a certain number of days in which you could go forward with a lawsuit in court. But oftentimes it doesn't go that far. Oftentimes what happens is the thing comes down and you both move on with your life. But it's a relatively affordable and effective way of protecting your copyrightable information, or not information, because we can't copyright information, but your copyrightable work from misuse.
Now, that was the Digital Millennium Act.
Copyright Act.
Oh, Copyright Act, okay. That's an excellent resource. I'm writing that down. But it brought up a question. Let me ask, what is something that's not copyrightable? You said information.
So, yeah, facts aren't copyrightable because that would be silly. A copyright gives you the right to exclusive ownership over that expression. It could be any number of different terms, depending on who you are and how the thing was created. But it's always a very long time. The standard is the life of the author, who is the person that created the thing, plus 70 years. So we're talking an extremely long period of time for you to have a monopoly over that. But copyright protects the expression of an idea, not the idea itself. So if you and I both come up with the idea for a story about a young orphan boy who is poorly treated by his parents, and then one day gets a letter that tells him he has been selected to go to a very special school, we can both write stories based on that idea, and we can both copyright our stories and not infringe on the other person's copyright, because all that's shared there is an idea, not necessarily how that idea was expressed. And again, the reason for that is because a copyright gives you such a monopoly over the thing, and for such a long period of time, we don't want to take things out of the public domain that would be useful, that other people could use to create things. So that's one that always gets people, is they really focus on protecting their ideas, and that's just not, it's very difficult to do, one, and two, it's not going to be a terrifically good investment of your time and energy, because that time and energy that you could have spent creating the thing that you could actually protect has been spent worrying about whether or not somebody is going to steal your idea and write a better story or create a better illustration or what have you.
So we can all have orphans that go to school, but we just can't send them to Hogwarts.
Right. You wouldn't use the same name of the school, but that's also not to say necessarily that somebody couldn't write a different story and call a school Hogwarts, and that would be totally off the books. It really would be fact specific. although Warner Brothers probably has trademarked the name Hogwarts. So you might not be able to sell something using that name.
Interesting. Well, it's so tangled and fascinating. I wanted to make sure that I swung back and asked another question. When we were talking about creating for a client and then turning the rights over to them, another question that seems to come up very often is this work for hire thing.
Mm-hmm.
When are you actually employed for yourself, and when are you actually an employee?
That is a pretty big question, and it's usually pretty fact-specific. But one of the things that the courts look at in terms of determining whether or not something fits within a work made for hire is, did you have full direction over how the thing was created and what it would look like in the end, or did the client really direct you in your work? Did the client pay for office space and materials, or did you provide those office space and materials? So they look at how much do you look like a normal employee. With work made for hire, the reason that it is so important is because under the traditional rules of copyright, as soon as something is, quote, fixed in a tangible medium of expression, so it can be perceived by somebody else, you draw a picture or write a story, the copyright protection attaches immediately, and the person that created that thing is the copyright owner. With work made for hire, the person creating the thing and the owner are different because from the very moment of creation, the company or client or entity that is hiring the artist to make the work made for hire is the owner of the copyright. And they can get different a different term that will apply to the length of that copyright protection. It's either 90 years from publication or 120 years from creation. So part of the reason is that somebody owning the copyright from the very beginning is different from you assigning a copyright to somebody else. You can create something and assign the copyright to them, but one of the things that the Copyright Act currently allows people to do is 35 years after an assignment, you can go and say, you know what, I changed my mind. I want that back. Okay. And so that is one of the reasons that the companies are so much more interested in a work made for hire than they are in a copyright assignment. That said, there are different ways of protecting yourself if you are buying a copyright, if you are having it assigned to you. There are all sorts of different things that you can do. But it's interesting because right now, particularly within comics, there are a number of creators that are coming back and saying, I assigned my rights in this particular character to you, but the time period has passed, and so I want it back. And the courts are kind of they're really struggling with some of that and trying to figure out how that applies.
It is. It's really a fascinating topic. I kind of flashed on Walt Disney and all of those illustrators who created characters for him, and it's such a tangle.
Mhm. Well, and a lot of those people would probably be considered employees because Disney, the Walt Disney Company, just employed a vast number of illustrators and cartoonists for such a long period of time. They had their own little machine going, and they directed all of that work. There was a style that they had to meet. There was, they provided desk space. They provided the materials. So much more likely that those people would be viewed as employees.
Yeah, it's fascinating. In this brave new world that we live in where we actually have, access to like 97% of the planet from our desktop, what would you suggest to someone who is creating today? Go to work for hire, even though it seems a little more safer, or go it alone?
I think it really depends on the job. There are going to be certain things that you create and you don't ever want to use again or see again, and it's not the thing that is important to you. It's the work experience. It's the challenge of that particular design. It's the contact with that client. It's the potential contact with that client's network. So it, again, really depends on what is most valuable to you within that particular job. There are situations where I think work for hire is perfectly acceptable, and that would be one of them. The other thing that you have to remember is if you have your copyright, in order for it to be really valuable, you have to have the ability to exploit it. You have to have the ability to use it. That means either you are producing the movie or the television show or the play based on your script. You're printing prints of your illustration and selling them either online or at conventions or different places. So you have to have the ability to really exploit that copyrightable thing for it to have value. If you've got the copyright and it sits in your drawer and you don't do anything with it, it's not nearly as valuable. So that's the other thing to consider is, am I going to use this again in the future? And I know a lot of artists struggle with that because you can't tell from the very beginning, like, yes, this is going to be fantastic, or no, this is going to be awful, or, no, I'm not interested in it in the future. And it can be very hard. But one of the other things I tell people is don't create your babies when you're doing work for hire. Don't take those ideas that you have been very lovingly building and working on and using over the last couple of years that you really want to see turn into something and give them away as a work made for hire. That's not the quality or the type of work you want to bring to those particular jobs.
Yeah, that's an excellent advice. You want to charge what you're worth and keep your worth for your highest price value, or whatever the word is I'm trying to find.
Absolutely. Again, it goes back to really sitting and thinking, like, what are my goals, what are my interests, and how does this particular job or this particular event fit into those goals and interests? How can I use what I'm doing right now to support that larger goal?
Definitely. I want to make sure we get in and talk about your negotiation workshops, because I think those are fascinating. I have one more question to ask on this line of, and it might actually kind of be a tangent. Tell me if it is. There is a lot of white label, or what do they call them, PLRs, products that are created and the rights are sold to a certain number of people to use them as they want to now out there. Do you know what I'm talking about? They're like white label products.
I'm not familiar with that. I don't think I've run across it.
Oh, okay. Well, most of them are like information products that are created, and then the rights are sold to maybe just 150 people, and they can use those products. So I don't know if that's getting into licensing or something like that, but I maybe that's the wrong question to ask.
It sounds to me like it's a licensing mechanism, and licenses are essentially contracts that say, I have these rights and I'm going to loan them to you for this particular purpose, and a license can be for a very specific period of time or for a much longer period of time. It can be exclusive, so I'm only giving you this right, or it can be non-exclusive. I still have the right to give other people licenses of this thing. So licenses are kind of fun because there are lots of different levers and buttons that you can push in figuring out exactly what is right for you and your product.
Do you see that kind of as a growing mechanism that self-employed people can use in their business?
Licenses and contracts have always been a wonderful tool. I think we're thinking of work in different ways. We're thinking of products and the things that people are creating in different ways because they're being created with new technology. But at basis, the mechanism that we use to share those things from a legal perspective, are, fairly old.
Interesting. Well, yeah, I just wanted to make sure I touched on that. That was another question I got from my people out there. And maybe that's another topic we'll have to really dig into. But I wanted to start talking maybe a little about the negotiation, because I think we don't think about negotiating in conjunction with, like, our copyrights or our contracts. Mm-hmm. And you are a negotiation expert. Tell me a little bit about why a creative or a solo-based business owner really needs to be a negotiation ninja.
Well, negotiation is that thing that you use whenever you want something that you don't have. So anytime that you want something that you don't have, negotiation is how you're going to use it. A lot of times we get this image of negotiating as being about dirty tricks or lots of puffing and really trying to make the other person feel intimidated, or it's something that business people do in their business suits in their business conference rooms. But negotiation is really just a communication device. It's how we talk about the things that we're interested in when we want to do something together. And if I want to sell you something, if you want to buy something from me, if we want to collaborate on a work, we're going to use communication skills to figure out how to make that work. And for me, negotiation is about identifying those communication skills and abilities that are most likely to get you what you want in the particular situation. And what you want is not just the money or the license or the job. It is also factoring in things like, is this a relationship that you want and need? Is this the type of work that you want to do? Do you want further opportunities to do it? Or is this really just a one and done and get out of there? Because depending on all of those other interests, you're going to negotiate differently. You're going to approach it a little bit differently, and you're going to be able to come up with different solutions.
That intrigues me. When you kind of started, I went immediately to kind of like a sales conversation.
Mm.
But then I also went to, when you're a little kid and you want an ice cream cone.
Absolutely. Kids are great negotiators because kids are really good at paying attention to like what works, and they'll use it, and they have no fear about going through different tactics and approaches, one right after another, because if this one doesn't work, they're going to drop it and they're going to move to the next one, whereas, we grow up and we tend to be more fearful about changing our approach in dealing with somebody, which is not to say that I suggest people, throw a tantrum and then promise that they're going to clean their room. But it is important to remember that you can try different approaches. If something's not working, don't beat your head against the wall and continue to do it. Change. Because the other thing is, I love puzzles. I love problems. It's probably one of the reasons that I'm an attorney. But I like looking at a problem and figuring out, okay, how can we move the different parts and pieces to get into an image or a situation or a solution that is more similar to what we actually want than what we have right now. So I actually think creative people are fantastic natural negotiators. They just have this perception that it's, one, not something they're supposed to be good at, and two, not something that they do, when in fact everybody negotiates pretty much every day.
Yeah, that's really kind of interesting, and I see really kind of more of a spectrum where you're just trying to move the little, counter a little closer to your side of what you'd like it to look like.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask, do you find that men and women negotiate differently? Do they have different tactics?
I think there are definitely different cultural norms. There have been studies that show fairly clearly that when women use more of the what American Western culture would consider more masculine or aggressive approaches, they are they're punished for it more than a man would be. Men tend to ask a lot of questions and feel very comfortable doing so. Women can be more reserved about asking questions and worry about whether or not it's rude to ask information about things like, hey, what's your budget? How much money do you have to spend on this? So there are some things that I think culturally are just accepted differently. And there are lots of people that are talking about this issue right now. The book Lean In is actually, it's pretty interesting if you work in a corporate environment, because she's just recognizing how things work differently for men and women. It is, I've enjoyed reading it. It is not a book that I've been recommending to a lot of freelancers or solos, just because the work environment is so different. When you are negotiating with a client, that is very different from negotiating for advancement within a company. So I think her examples are not always immediately applicable to somebody who's working for themselves.
So there's room for a new book, huh?
Well, and it's definitely interesting information. And one of the things I try to talk to my clients about and the people that I work with is it's not about changing you. It's about finding the negotiation style that works best for who you are. So if you're a quiet and reserved person, it does you no good to force yourself into a negotiation style that requires constant engagement and, using a very loud voice or making a lot of chit-chat. You're setting yourself up to fail if you're trying to adopt a persona that feels uncomfortable from the very beginning. So it's better to identify, okay, what are the things that I'm good at? What are the things that I have confidence in? And how can I use those when I negotiate? Because everybody's got different skills. And if everybody did everything the same way, it would be very boring. So, and confidence really does play a huge part in how well you negotiate. So I really encourage the people I work with to say, let's start from a place where you feel good and improve from there, as opposed to figure out what you feel really rotten about and spend all of our time talking about how rotten you feel that you're not, fill in the blank.
I love that, coming from an authentic place in who you really are. So when you are running your negotiation seminars, how do you set people up for that? How do you help them find where their authentic place is, or where their center of confidence is? Do you have like an exercise you go through with them, or how do you help them find that place?
I do a lot of outreach at comic book conventions and other places where I'm likely to run into more freelancers, particularly creative freelancers. Cartoonists and comic book creators are a good portion of my client base. So I'll go to the conventions and I'll do a 50-minute seminar, and I try to use examples of things where you're going to find yourself in that situation at some point in time, or a situation that's very similar, and show you how that situation can be very similar to asking for a raise or really pushing back when somebody is trying to get you to sign a contract that's not in your best interest. And then the other thing I do is I'll use psychological tricks. I feel any way that gets you pumped up and feeling good about yourself is aces and perfectly on the table. So I'll talk to people about mirroring, which basically is our brain's tendency to want to mirror the emotion that we see either in somebody else or from music. So I'll tell people, make a mixed, I guess it's no longer a mixtape, but make a playlist of some of your favorite songs that are really upbeat and get you going, and listen to that before you have an important phone call. Another thing that science has recently shared with us is that if you stand like Wonder Woman with your hands on your hips, standing very tall, if you stand like that for 2 minutes, you'll increase your testosterone levels. And increased testosterone, increased testosterone levels are associated with being less risk averse, being more willing to take on risk. So if you can sort of trick your body into feeling a bit more confident, that can often get you going and get you through some conversations. So I have a bag of tricks.
And those magic wristbands are really cool too.
Exactly.
Well, how fun. So, Katie, if one of our listeners wanted to maybe slip into one of your negotiation seminars, how can they find out about those?
They can come to my website, which is workmadeforhire.net. I've got a section there on upcoming classes and seminars. I'm going to be at Geek Girl Con in October up in Seattle, and the Surrey International Writers Conference in BC also in late October. So those are two places where people can find me. The other thing is that if you have a studio or a group of friends or a small office, a co-working space, and you'd be interested in a negotiation seminar or some classes, give me a call. I work with people to figure out how to provide that at an affordable cost, and I think it's really fun when you get to do it with people that you know. When you already feel comfortable with a group, it just makes it a little bit easier.
Oh, excellent. Well, I know there are lots of those groups here in Portland, especially.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
And we will get the word out to our peeps here. Well, Katie, this has just been so much fun. Thank you so much for joining me on today's show and sharing all this knowledge and expertise that we so need for our businesses.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I had a lot of fun. I really appreciate getting to talk to people about this stuff. It's exciting to me.
Well, and it's so necessary for so many of us, and it's a kind of a missing piece in a lot of businesses.
Absolutely.
Well, cool. Once again, that's Katie Lane, attorney for creative and intellectual property, and the website is workmadeforhire.net. And Katie, can people find you on Facebook as well?
They can find me on Twitter, which is my Twitter handle is @Katie_Lane. That's the easiest way to find me on social media.
Okay, great. And you're on LinkedIn too, so they can run there and chase you down. We'll make sure
Absolutely.
Plenty of avenues into you. So for Solo Pro Radio, I want to thank you so much for listening. Join us again next Thursday when we have another exciting conversation on running your business easier and more profitably. Thanks for listening.